Hi, my name is Ashley and I'm a mom of two little girls. I have a 5-year-old named Kylie and I also have a 3-year-old named Mia. For today's video, I'm going to be answering a question that I received from some very tired parents, and it reads as follows. We have a delightful 10-month-old daughter who is curious and determined. She has been sleeping in a floor bed since she was 6 months old and has started becoming independently mobile, crawling around her room. We have always been able to offer her help to fall asleep, rocking when she was young, and recently cuddling her in bed, but would like to encourage her to learn to fall asleep independently, as our methods are suddenly taking an hour plus to get her to sleep. How can we teach her as respectfully as possible? So first, I really just want these parents to know that they're not alone. I remember being there very vividly. I'm sure thousands of other parents who are watching this video also recall being there, or maybe they're there right now too, and that's why they're watching this video. And so I'm really hoping that today's video is going to offer a little bit of a perspective shift and also some really practical tips on how to handle this kind of situation, because it certainly is not easy. So from one busy parent to another, today I would like to share some floor bed sleep tips for some really tired parents. All right, so first off, I'm always a little nervous, to be honest, to tackle questions like this on such a public platform like YouTube, because it's just, sleep is such a personal decision and it's such a controversial topic. Everybody has their own opinions and ideas about the way sleep should look, especially in infancy. And the reality is that everybody has different circumstances, right? So there are families across the world, Montessori or not, there are families across the world who choose to co-sleep. That is part of their culture. It's like not even a question. They co-sleep together in the same bed for many years before the children eventually achieve sleep independence and they're sleeping in their own space or their own area. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have families who would like to encourage their child to fall asleep from as early an age as possible. And then of course there's the gray area in between, right? Where there's families that do kind of a mix of both approaches. They're looking for what they consider gentle sleep training methods. You've got some parents who might be stay-at-home parents. They've got a little bit more time and flexibility to kind of work through these skills with their child. And then you have other parents who might be working a lot and maybe really odd hours too, like at nighttime, you know? And so they don't have that flexibility and they just find themselves becoming really tired and overwhelmed and exhausted really quickly. And then there's also the consideration of how many children you actually have at home, because that is certainly also going to impact your ability to, go through this journey with your child. And so again, there's not really any one right way to do this. And I'm certainly not professing the advice or the tips that I'm about to share with you in this video today to be the one right way. I fully respect the fact that there are so many different ways to do this, and that, what one family is comfortable with, other families might not be comfortable with. And it's just what it really comes down to is everybody has to do what works for their family and what they feel is right. So if it's not broken, if what you're doing is working for your family, there's no need to change what you're doing if it's working for everyone. But with that said, if there are parents like this family that wrote in this question who are looking to make a change, if what they have been doing is no longer working for them and they're seeking some kind of a step forward in the process, that is what I'm hoping to offer today, are just some ideas, other things that you can try and see if they work for you. And if they don't, they don't. Then, you're kind of back to square one and you have to experiment a little more to see what does work. But these are some things that I tried with my own children as a Montessori family. These are also some of the same techniques that I have heard echoed throughout the Montessori community, other families who have done the same thing successfully as well. And so I'm just kind of hoping that by sharing these tips with you, that maybe it will be helpful. So let's dive in. All right, so these parents mentioned that they have a very curious 10-month-old daughter who has been sleeping in a floor bed since she was 6 months old. So she's already got a couple of months under her belt. And that's great because that means this is a familiar place to her. We don't have to go through this transition period of changing to the floor bed. So that definitely helps. But the problem they're running into now is that she is becoming increasingly mobile. She's starting to get out of her bed and explore, and it's kind of impeding her ability to fall asleep independently. So they rocked her when she was a little bit younger, and then they were cuddling her in her bed, which is actually one of my favorite benefits of a floor bed, is that the parent can often get into the bed with them and cuddle and do that kind of thing. But that's not working for them anymore. So they really are looking for a way to help her learn how to do this on her own, but to do it as gently and respectfully as possible. So where I want to start off with this is just kind of laying out what I feel is the obvious, but just in case it's not, she's 10 months old, so this is developmentally appropriate for her to be, crawling all over the place, exploring her environment. Maybe she's starting to pull up and cruise along furniture and things like that. So this is exciting for her. This is a really big moment in her young life at 10 months old to be able to kind of take control of her environment, to just go out and explore her own sense of will, that she can get up and do what she would like. And that is actually the purpose of a floor bed, is to encourage that independence, to encourage her to develop her will in that sense. And so it sounds like she is getting what she is supposed to be getting out of the floor bed. But the concern for a lot of parents when that starts to happen is, oh no, what if my child doesn't go to sleep? And so they feel like they need to be in there to help them fall asleep. And maybe that's working, like I said, for quite a while, especially when they're a lot younger. That certainly can help them to fall asleep, to have a parent there, that, that closeness and that security. But if you're looking for a way to help her to learn to fall asleep by herself, what it's really going to come down to is practice. Because without opportunities for practice, it's going to be a bit more difficult for her to learn how to fall asleep on her own without the assistance of an adult, because that's what she's been used to up until this point. So what does this look like in practice? How do we actually offer our child opportunities to practice falling asleep independently? Well, first things first, it's going to take a lot of confidence on your part as the adult to know that she can do it. She will do it eventually. It might just take a little bit of time. So kind of shifting your expectations around a little to understand that this is not something that she is going to learn in one day, right? I mean, if she does, then she would be the exception to the norm. For a lot of children, it does take a little bit of time, and that's okay. You just have to be patient and, again, confident in the process. So this really starts off with having a solid nap time routine and a bedtime routine. So the nap time routine can often be like a shortened version of the bedtime routine. Having that consistent predictability is actually really helpful for a child in like kind of learning the cues of what's coming next. So for example, if your bedtime routine was to kind of pick up the play area, maybe then go upstairs, get into pajamas, or take a bath and then get into pajamas, brush teeth if she has any teeth, and then maybe have some milk, read some bedtime stories, sing some songs, cuddle, and go to bed. Let's just say that was what it is. It can certainly be shorter or whatever you want it to be, as long as it's consistent. And then you have maybe a shortened version of that nap time routine. So you don't need to take a bath and brush teeth and all that stuff, but maybe you do still keep the part where you maybe read a couple of books and sing some songs and then cuddle before you get into the bed. Whatever that routine is, again, just make sure it is as consistent as possible, because that is going to be helpful for her. They're like little flag markers along the way. And she's like, oh, I know sleep is coming because this is what happens every single day. After the bedtime stories and after we sing a song, mom or dad tucks me into bed and they give me a kiss and then they shut the door and it's lights out. And then I get sleepy and I fall asleep. They learn that much more quickly when it's the same thing every single time. So make sure you've got a solidly established bedtime and nap time routine. And once that is in place, then you basically just need to be as consistent with it as you can. Again, knowing that there's going to be some need for flexibility along the way, and I'll give you some examples in just a minute, but trying to be as consistent as you can. So what I would say for nap time, for example, and sometimes families actually prefer to do this just for nap time first, like kind of to help them get used to it before they do it at nighttime too. And that's okay, something you can try. You want to go through your nap time routine. Let's say it's to put her in a sleep sack or something, close the curtains, turn on the noise machine, and then you put her in bed and you say, okay, I love you, give her a kiss, and then you leave the room and you shut the door. And that is that. And on the first time that you do this, if she's been accustomed to having you in the room, then a couple of different things could happen. You might get lucky. Maybe she'll stay in the bed and fall asleep, although I don't think that's quite likely, but it could happen. Another thing that could happen is that she gets out of bed and she starts exploring her room. Maybe you have like a couple of toys, maybe like one or two books sitting out, and she chooses to get out of her bed and kind of play with some of those things for a little bit. And this is why we recommend that you only have just a couple of things so that it's not like super overstimulating to keep them awake. But just just a couple things. If she wants to get out of bed and explore some of those toys or books for a little while, that's okay. She can totally do that. That is the point of the floor bed. She is thinking to herself, okay, I'm not tired yet. She's listening to her body cues. So she's getting out, she's exploring until she starts to feel sleepy, at which point she will either go back to the bed, although in my experience, that doesn't happen until they're a little bit older. Oftentimes when they're younger and they're new to this, they just kind of fall asleep on the floor where they were playing. And that is okay too. As long as she's comfortable, you don't have any safety concerns about her sleeping on the floor, then she can stay there. If she falls asleep, then she's likely pretty comfortable where she is, and you can leave her there for the duration of her nap. Eventually, again, as they get older, they learn to go back to the bed before that happens, or they will wake up and take themselves back to the bed. But it's not something that you really need to stress over. Again, as long as they look comfortable, I am always in the camp of just leave them. And then the other thing that could happen is maybe she actually comes to the door and maybe she fusses a little bit. Maybe she falls asleep behind the door. That's okay. You just have to be careful when you go back in that you don't bonk her with it, open it real slow. But if she falls asleep behind the door or next to the door, that's okay too. If she does start, like banging or fussing or kind of making some noises at the door, like she's clearly calling for you, I would give it a couple of minutes. Don't rush in right away. Give her the opportunity to see if she can fall asleep by herself. Just a couple of minutes, because again, she's new to it. And if she's still doing it after a couple of minutes, then I would say it's fine to go in and, again, be careful if she's right behind the door when you open it, but you can go in, gently lead her back to the bed and say, it's time for you to rest your body now. I love you. Give her a kiss. Walk back out, shut the door, exactly what you did before. Keep it exactly the same. It might take a couple of repetitions of you doing this before she finally understands it. Again, it's going to take probably at least a couple of days before she really gets it, and that's okay. If there's a parent watching this video who is doing this with a slightly older child who is already a confident walker, then it's a lot more likely, I think, that they're gonna get out of bed a lot more often, and you're gonna have to repeat this process many times in the same napping session or at bedtime. And that's okay. You just have to be there and be ready, kind of expecting it to happen so that you're right there to gently lead them right back to the bed with the same message every time. But I promise you, I went through this process with both of my children. They eventually get it. You just have to be consistent with it. And again, you have to kind of shift your expectations. It has to be okay with you if they are in a floor bed and they have access to their whole room, that sometimes they're going to fall asleep not on the bed when they're younger. It's just par for the course when they're learning how to sleep in a floor bed, because they do have that freedom to leave. But as long as you're okay with that, and again, like I said, as long as they feel comfortable where they are, they're sleeping peacefully, you don't have any safety concerns, there's no need for you to go in and move them back to the bed, because there's a pretty good chance you're going to wake them up when you do that. And that's the opposite of what you want to happen. So it's just having trust in our child to know what they need and allowing it to happen, just trusting that process. And then eventually over time, as I said earlier, as they get older, they learn to go back to the bed, or they learn to actually stay in the bed, because the routine is so consistent from day to day that they, again, learn okay, this is the routine, lights out, time for me to sleep. I'm actually feeling kind of sleepy. And then they just stay in bed. And that's it. And it's really not an issue anymore. But we have to have confidence in ourselves that we can accompany our child through this process until they've mastered the skill. And we have to have confidence in our child that they can do it. Because as soon as we have any sense of nervousness or anxiety or ambivalence about the process, children are very good at picking up on those subtle body language cues. I mean, it could be something as small as a facial expression, your eyebrows are furrowed, you're kind of worried. They see these things and they're like, oh no, they're not confident that I can do this. There's something to be scared of. Now I'm scared, I'm nervous, and we just have to, you almost kind of have to fake it till you make it. You just have to be confident that you can do this and know that there's going to be some bumps along the way. There might be a little bit of fussing. You don't have to let it go on for an extremely long period of time. I'm certainly not suggesting that you just let your child cry it out in the room and walk away. I think that there is some benefit for your child to know that you are there and that you are going to answer their call if they need you, in that way. And so that's why I said, just, give them a couple of minutes just to see. But if it really goes on, then you can go in and reassure them with your presence. I'm here and I'm going to take you back to bed because it is time to rest your body. You're responding, you're there, you're not completely abandoning them. I actually did a form of this, kind of like a gradual release method that I talked about in a different sleep video. I'll actually link that down below. A long time ago, I did this with my older daughter. This was like kind of my first foray into helping her learn how to fall asleep independently. She was a little bit older, she was a toddler, but I did have to like sit in the room because she was so upset by it. You know, she cried a lot and I didn't want to just leave her. So I sat in the room with her and kind of gradually moved my position closer and closer to the door until she was okay with it and wasn't crying anymore. And then I was eventually outside the door. And even after that, I still sat outside the door for many days because I knew that she would get up and get out of bed, and I wanted to be right there to help gently lead her back to bed and to let her know that I'm there, I'm not going anywhere, you know, I'm still here. And that was comforting to her enough that eventually she was okay with staying in her own bed. You know, mom didn't completely disappear just because I shut the door. She needed that reassurance. And that's the way it is for a lot of kids. So it's just about being patient, taking some time, having confidence in our children that they can do it, you know, really steeling ourselves for what might happen and being as strong as we can for our child. And yeah, just, you know, giving ourselves and our children some grace. Now, with all of that said, I know the question is going to come up and I know it happened to me too, so I'm just going to address it now, is what happens if I go through all of these steps and my child is like screaming bloody murder behind the door? Like they are just not having it. They do not want to go to sleep. Honestly, I read this tip somewhere. I don't remember where anymore. It was so long ago. And I tried it and I thought it was pretty helpful. I actually would just take her out of the room. If it got to that point, I would just take her out of the room, like, okay, we're waking up basically, even though the nap never happened. She had the opportunity for rest, you know, but it didn't happen. So I would just get her up, take her out of her sleep sack, open the curtains as if she had taken the nap, and I would keep her up for like another half hour, 45 minutes, maybe an hour, kind of depending on like what her energy level looked like, because I mean, clearly she was tired, overtired at that point. But I would get her up and keep her up for a little bit longer, and then I would try again. And I would do the same process all over again. And usually by like the second, maybe the third time, happened once on like one occasion, that was it. Usually by that time, they're so tired, they just conk out and they are able to get some sleep. And it does throw off the nap schedule for that day, but it's pretty easy to reset the next day. And it's not really that big of a deal. It's not going to like completely mess everything up. So that was what I did if it really got to that point. But in all honesty, it never really got to that point very often. Maybe once or twice, maybe 3 times, you know, at most. It was a rare occurrence. And over time, again, with being consistent and having a lot of practice with this process and it being the same every single day, multiple times a day for every nap, very quickly they get it. And then you do kind of fall into this routine and, you know, before you know it, you're there and you're like, yay, it's happening. Now, one more thing that I wanted to address is whether or not to actually shut the door. And I know I mentioned in my examples to shut the door because that is what I did. I didn't start out that way. I was actually kind of nervous to shut the door all the way. And to be honest, I'm not sure why. I think it was just one of those parental fears that didn't really make any sense that I had. But I would suggest shutting the door because it helps to kind of keep them in there and it helps to make it dark so that they're better able to fall asleep. You know, like that melatonin production can kick in from the darkness. And so I thought it was really helpful. If closing the door is not something that is an option for you, you could also experiment with putting one of those pressure mounted baby gates in the doorway. This way you can take it off when it's not nap time and it's not, you know, an obstruction to them getting in and out of the room, especially if that's where they tend to play sometimes. But having a baby gate in the doorway can actually help to keep them in the room. And then for anyone else who's watching the video who, again, may have a slightly older child, maybe a toddler, who does know how to open the knob on a completely shut door, having that baby gate in the doorway as an added measure of protection can be helpful just for ensuring your child's safety, especially if the bedroom is up on like the second level of a home where there might be some stairs that you're worried about. So that can be helpful too. But again, just something to try, not necessarily something you need to do if it's not really necessary given your situation. All right, friends, so I hope you found these floor bed sleep tips to be helpful. If you did, then please be sure to give this video a thumbs up. And if you'd like more practical tips and advice for implementing Montessori at home with your children, then you might also consider subscribing to my channel. This way you don't miss a new video. My book, The Montessori Home, Create a Space for Your Child to Thrive, is now available available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook on Amazon and in all major book retailers. I also have several e-courses, an online community just for Montessori parents where I do live group coaching sessions once a month. And for anyone who is looking for some more individualized support, I also offer live private coaching sessions. So links to all of those resources are in the description box down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.